contact to family members when you were overseas than you did when you were not overseas?
Yes and no. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was not prepared for that. I lived in the States, saw my family and did all the normal stuff. But when we left, it was scheduled. I talked to my dad every Sunday. I talked to my mom every Sunday afternoon. We Skyped, and it was like every week. And then I'd come back to the States, and it's like, oh, it's been 3 months and I haven't seen your face, because we don't make the time, because we just assume that being on the same country makes us understand each other better. I don't know, but
I will say I text my dad a lot more on the field, but what it started is he's an early riser. And so he would be up by 5 and out the door by 6. And then he spends the first 2 hours at work all on his own, because he's a salesman. So he would do all like the paperwork or admin before the hours started. So I knew when I was doing things during the day that he would be the one awake. And so like when we first moved overseas, we just kind of got in the habit of messaging or texting more, because I knew he was awake. And it was actually a really great way to connect personally with someone and just share, those early bits of life. And I mean, we still do it, not as much now, but yeah, I think we probably text loads more now than we did before. But we Zoom now a lot less because everybody's Zooming. So
everybody is Zooming. It's like,
so we don't actually talk that much right now.
Yeah.
It's so true. Yeah. Well, I think Sarah has us up and going now, right?
Yep, we are live.
We are live. Well, welcome, Velvet Ashes community, to our Facebook Live this morning. And today we are just going to continue our summer live series. I've been having a blast with this. I've so enjoyed connecting to women all over the world about topics that are really meaningful. And today is not astray from that. We are going to talk about wedded bliss overseas and just the challenges and blessings of being married on a continent that's different than where you got married on, probably for some of us. But today we have special guests from Uganda and from Ireland. And so we're going to let them introduce themselves in just a minute. And I'm going to just quickly introduce this series, what we've been doing, and myself. So what we've been doing with Summer Live is just opening up this conversation. It's things that have been buried in our hearts that we are probably talking about with the women right where we are. But some of us, that may be a handful of people that we feel we can talk to. And there are loads of you all out there going through this. And we just want to create that connection for you to hear and talk and maybe create conversations where you are as well, based on what you're talking about here. We want to make this a place where we share resources. So if you are listening to this even after the fact and you're like, oh my goodness, I have this that has been a great help, please add that in the comments. We like to compile those as well. And what we are doing at Velvet Ashes to make this easier for you to find is we're putting this on YouTube and links to it on our Instagram. Is that right, Sarah? So that because it gets kind of buried there on our Facebook page. And so if you heard about, oh, I knew they talked about singleness and I really wanted to hear about that, but you got to scroll down quite a ways. There's links to this on our Instagram and easier to find on our YouTube. So don't feel overwhelmed if you were trying to go back and rewatch one of them from before. I'm Denise Beck. I'm Executive Director here at Velvet Ashes, and it's my joy to be here with you guys today. My family and I think I say this every week, but we lived and worked in Uganda and South Sudan, and this is something that I did. I was married overseas, and so this is a topic that I am very excited to talk about today. I'm just going to kind of help ask questions and direct conversation for our special guests today as they share with you their heart about this as well. Sarah Hilkeman, she's over here for me. She's probably not for everybody else, but Sarah is our program coordinator here at Velvet Ashes. Sarah, tell us a little bit about what your role is going to be today as we talk about this.
Yeah, for sure. I am excited to be on with you all, and I will be hanging out in the comments with you. So feel free to add your questions or your thoughts there, and I will make sure that those questions get shared with our guests so that they can answer those and just chat with you. I served on the field in Southeast Asia for 5 years as a single. And so I'm excited for this conversation just to learn from these ladies how to be a good friend and a good teammate to the married ladies in my life as a single.
Which is so important. Oh my goodness. I love that we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay, Karen, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're at, and all things Karen.
Okay. My computer just told me my internet connection is unstable. So
Of course.
fingers crossed you can
Yeah.
hear me okay. I'm Karen. We live in Dublin, Ireland. I'm also the graphic designer for Velvet Ashes, and occasionally write, though probably a little less now than I used to, but still very involved and love Velvet Ashes. So yes, we've been married 20 years, 15 of which have been on the field in Ireland. We have 3 children, and I was writing down some notes earlier just about why I'm here today. And one thing that we try and be authentic about, though I know it's tough, is we've had really great years of marriage on the field and really tough years of marriage on the field. So I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later, but I was chatting to my husband beforehand, and I said, I'm going to tell them I asked your permission to, say all this stuff, when really I didn't. I just told him I was going to, but
that covers it.
so, but that's us. 20 years married, 15 on the field, from Kansas City, but yeah, now in Dublin, with our 3 very much growing, maturing kids. So it's a different marriage now than it was when we first arrived. That's for sure.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah, no kidding. Well, thank goodness, right? Thank goodness
Yes.
marriages continue to grow and morph. And
Mhm.
all right, Heidi, you're coming to us from a different context. Tell us a little bit about where you're at.
I am in Mbali, Uganda, which is where Denise also lived and served for a while. We are in the middle of rain, and it's beautiful and gorgeous. And nice now. How do I explain this? I started off serving here in Mbali in 2006 as a single, and served here for 2 years single. Went home for a furlough, came back with a boyfriend, and we served here together. Both of us from the US here, so had dating experience on the field, and then went back, got married, and a few years later came back. And so I've been in and out of this place several times, and I've kind of done a little bit of everything. Don't have any I would never say, like I have all the answers for every single part of this ever. I'm not an expert, but I have ideas of what it's like to serve single, dating, and married in this context. So,
And how long have you been married? Did you say that and I missed it?
10.5 years.
10 and a half?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very good. Well, honestly, if anybody is watching that has questions for Heidi about any of those seasons of her life, maybe she can hop on into the comments, because we did have a conversation about being single, dating, and all of that on the field last week. And there was lots of good questions about that. So and I just want to echo on what Heidi said, is that we are not coming to you as experts in this, but just as women who want to open this conversation, because the mystery and the overwhelmedness that surrounds this topic only remains that overwhelming when we don't talk about it. But when you start to crack that door open and share from your heart and your experience, you begin to give people the tools to feel like they can have hope to make this a good experience. So with that, I think also what I want to just point out is that we have women who are operating in different places in the world. And so how marriage looks and how they can interact with their spouses also looks different. And from the parts of the world where you're at, we recognize that the way that you can interact with your spouse may be dictated by that part of the world. I remember there were places where Josh and I couldn't hold hands or even sit together or be included in the same conversations because of the area of the world that we were in. And so that also plays a part in how you feel connected to and can navigate stuff. So why don't you guys talk a little bit about where you're at and that dynamic where you're at? Karen, you start. Or
Karen. No, go ahead.
I was going to defer to Heidi on this, just because I think that the marriage culture is probably more similar to the US. Western Europe would be at least in most spaces, what our marriage would look like here is very similar to what it looked like in the US. It's a very egalitarian culture. And, a lot of our ministries or small groups, things that we would be involved in would be, very co-ed, as, we used to say in college. So yeah, I don't think that we have many, maybe, visual, obvious differences in marriage and how it would look or how we might, act with each other in public. So yeah, I would probably definitely defer to Heidi on this and their experience.
Oh man, Ugandan culture is very male and female, and they have their separate spaces and their separate ways, and almost sometimes it feels like never the twain shall meet. But that is starting to change. In the younger generations, you're seeing more of the guys and girls going out, and every once in a while you see them going down the street holding hands, and I'm like, whoa, because I'm part of the older generation. You don't do that, like, oh, can't do that. When we were dating, it was like we did not even sit together at church, like, stay away 5 feet, let room for the Holy Spirit, okay? We have it since we've been here about 4 years now, married. We still don't hold hands in public. We don't even cuddle in our living room because there are people outside of the windows as our security guards, and they're honestly, they're looking in, and that's fine. We're not worried about that, but it's also like, that's awkward. So we don't cuddle in the living room. It's like, we have a room for that. And so, like, at church, we do sit together. He doesn't put his arm around me like he would in the US. We have found little ways in public still to kind of keep that connection. And it's usually like, if we're praying, he'll kind of just make sure his knee is touching my leg or something in church, or put his arm on my hand, or just he'll somehow gesture so I know I'm included and not just, you're not part of my life.
No, I think that's really important, because in those kinds of cultures, when you're used to feeling connected through a touch or being involved in the same conversations, and finding those ways that you can, like, I know for Josh and I, when we would be walking and I would be like, hey, I really wish I could hold your hand right now. Or, like, just, we can talk and we can say what we want, but it lets him know that, hey, just because I can't doesn't mean I don't want to. I haven't forgotten. I still want to be connected to you. And so I think you bring up a really good point of, when you're in a culture that does not allow for that, you have to work to find those ways to communicate to each other, because we have grown up in a culture that's the way you are, and that's how you communicate that to each other. And so recognizing when that's missing, how do I fill that hole again? So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And that's also a really good point about, even in your home, that there's certain areas that
always eyes.
There's always eyes that can, so not to just jump right to this, but marriage is a challenge, and sometimes you have to have an argument. And so when marriage is something that you are trying to use as a ministry tool to show people, Christ in your relationship, how does that work when you have to have a harsh conversation or exchange differences of opinions? What have you guys found to help navigate those challenging dynamics?
For myself, I am a turtle. So any kind of confrontation, I'm like, whoa, done, and get me out of here. I'm running away as fast as my turtle legs will carry me. And it's been a struggle our whole marriage. We had to, just the come to Jesus. You got to confront, and it's okay, and we will still love each other, and so neither one of us are the harsh yell, get your feelings out on the table. He doesn't do that, and I definitely don't. And so most of the time people don't, even in, I can think of one time at church where we were not seeing eye to eye, and he did something that really hurt, and nobody knew we were having a conflict except him and I, because there were no words, but there was a few looks and a few, like, ow. And he's like, this is a catchphrase we've started using for this very specific purpose. Are we okay? Nope. But we'll talk later, and it's the acknowledgement that no, there's a problem between you and I. This is not this time or space. And usually for me, it gives me the time to gather my thoughts, to get the courage to say what's on my mind, and to actually enter into that confrontation from a healthier standpoint. And for him, it's like, he's a lion. So it's really funny. We have, turtle and lion coming together, trying to conflict. But at least he doesn't yell, but we have found that phrase to just be a reminder that, okay, I see there's a problem. And is it about me, or is it about something else that I didn't catch? And it can be, something else happened, we'll talk later, or yeah, I have a problem, but can we wait? We kind of take it to whatever room we need to, or if we need to talk right now, we go do that. But.
So Karen, in a culture that is a little more Western, where people maybe are, used to that dynamic, how do you guys choose to handle conflict? Or, because I think that there's times when you also want to exhibit healthy conflict. And so like as teaching people that, hey, it's good to work things out in a healthy way. And sometimes, so what do you guys do?
Do most of our maybe public heated discussions have been in small group context with local believers, which, I think maybe that's just a byproduct of being in relationship with people, being in an intimate setting, praying together, reading the Bible, talking about difficult things where, I can think of one instance where it wasn't even anything I disagreed with generally, but he, said something or kind of led the discussion and said, like, committed us both to something. And I was like, well, I don't think we talked about that before coming in here. And, and it was a complicated discussion anyway. And so it was very quickly upfront with everybody. They could see the tension between us. And we did kind of have to work it out within the group. One great thing about that is you can't turtle. And I don't know if I'm a turtle. I may be like that little like desert creature that when it sees something coming, it like quickly runs, under a rock, or like, we watched a lot of nature documentaries, and there's, I can't even remember. It was a dust devil or something. And it's actually like a horny, rocky, like it's got thorns, like it looks like little horns on it. And when it sees, a predator coming, it like scurries away and turns, it looks like a thorny stone. That's kind of me. I become thorny and stone-like. And so we did have to very graciously and honestly kind of work that out with our friends and with people that we were in relationship with, which can be a really great experience, when it is with people that you trust, or it is in a trusting, safe environment. There have been times where we have had to take it home and have a conversation, but I think we are fortunate in that this culture does value heated debate, and it does value a woman's opinion. And so I think maybe it's given us maybe more room to practice in public. We've had recently, in the last few years, there's been a lot of cultural change in Ireland. So a lot of issues have come to the fore where you are having difficult conversations. And I think that the Lord has blessed us in ways to, I don't know if we're perfect examples, but to exercise that muscle, I guess, in safe ways. But yeah, I've definitely been one to kind of, get real thorny real quick.
Well, and I feel like there's just so many things that I want to talk about, and I'm trying to like think in my mind, like, how do we best navigate all of this? But the truth is that marriage in itself is hard. So whether you are in your passport culture and just having all of the resources at your fingertips, or isolated and not even knowing who you can talk to, marriage is hard. And being a cross-cultural worker does not make you immune from the things in your relationship. And there are divorces among cross-cultural workers. There are major sin issues. There is adultery. I mean, all of those things, just flat out there, don't let your guard down. Just because you have chosen to serve in this capacity does not make you immune or exempt from anything. And keeping your guard up, this protection, the mindset that you are an agent for God's good and his blessing in your spouse's life, you have to keep that on the forefront. And so even if you're doing that and you get to a point where your conflict becomes something that you're like, I don't know that we together have the resources to move past this. What do you do when you're overseas, when you need to bring somebody else in? What have you all found or witnessed in other people that have been helpful for that?
I'll go quickly and we can come back if we want. But just from personal experience, my parents were divorced and divorced when I was young. They were both in lay or part-time ministry. So I definitely was aware that, or not even aware, but really sensitive to the idea that marriages in ministry are on the front lines of a real spiritual battle. And that has just been a part of our dynamic of our marriage from day one, to be very aware of that, sensitive to it, and to have a posture of working through it quickly if we can, but if not, to find ways, to find resources, and to find help when necessary. So it has been a part of our marriage culture, I would say, from day one. But we have taken, or we've had times where I don't even know that it would be conflict necessarily, but times of stress, of burnout, of disappointment majorly. And, where we've had to be really proactive in saying, this is not sustainable. This is hurting, and if it's hurting us, then it's also hurting our kids, and it's also hurting our ministry, and being willing to take steps back, which I think sometimes, I think all of us at times are not necessarily willing to take a step back from something, because there is risk involved and there is loss involved. But we have tried to take real full advantage of what has been available and to seek out what hasn't been available. So our organization has great member care, and we have found in our member care people that we trust within that, both of us together, separately, together separately, that's right. Both of us separately have our, we have people who've walked with us for a lot of this time, these 15 years. And then we also have someone that we know we can talk with together and who can help us, through that. We've had to take a week away and do intense member care with a counselor, so that we could get healthy and stay healthy on the field. And that involved a lot of risk to tell people this is something we're going to do, and we need to do it for our marriage and ministry, and trust that, that obedience to God, the burden that God had placed on us, that it would be honored by our organization, it would be honored by our supporters, and it was. And well, I think it was. Several years down the line, I can see that he was faithful to that. But it is risky in that moment, and I wish that we did talk about that more, because I think there is a lot of fear or shame attached to it. Because oh, go ahead.
What I love about what you're saying, though, is you incorporate that into your marriage. It's just, this is the way it is. And I think, if I could go back and tell people that are just going to the field, is already have that plan that you are going to meet with a counselor, plan that you're going to get away and seek that help, even if you don't, because then when you are sharing it with your sending organization or your supporters, it was like, no, this is something that we knew we were going to need. And you don't have to maybe feel that shame from the beginning, oh, we need to tell our supporters that we actually need to raise a little bit of funds because our marriage is in trouble and we need this. And it's like, from the beginning, we valued this and we're going to put this in, knowing marriage is hard, and it takes a little bit of that stigma away if you start off with it.
Yeah, definitely.
We don't have an organization that has sent us here. We are independent, if you will. And for us, we knew coming in, we're like, if we don't have an organization, we don't have member care. We don't have someone who's got our back. And so I honestly don't remember how we decided this was the best thing for us, but we kind of made this panel of people with either experience cross-culturally or best friends who know us intimately, or just somehow deeply connected with us. And we, unfortunately, some things work out, some things don't. We were writing questions every other week to these people, and they would ask questions. They would ask, how's your marriage? How's your family? How's this? How's that? How's your relationship with Jesus? And we, like I said, that's hard to do every 2 times a month and once a month. And now I don't even remember the last time I did it, but we have these people, and we know in any type of difficulty, we can go to them and say, we don't know what to do. We have come to our last end, and we don't know from within ourselves how to get past this. And I mean, 2 people that we think of immediately, we would go to them, call them, they would be our first line of defense. And then after that, I have people I talk to, if not more, who they ask the question, how are you and how is your marriage? And they know if I'm lying because that's who they are. And
so basically, I hear from both of you, make sure you have a team of people around you that make you feel that way. Sarah, sure. I want to make sure that we give time for any comments or questions that people might be putting in.
Yeah, there's some good comments about just the idea of differences in culture, where there might be an expectation of what marriage looks like in the culture where you are serving. And so kind of finding the balance between that expectation and modeling what, a godly marriage is like, which you guys have kind of touched on a little bit, but if you want to go deeper on that, just when there's that difference.
Well, and I think maybe you could even talk about when gender roles, like Karen, you mentioned that women's voices are valued, but I know in certain parts in Africa, there's definitely that separation. And how do you reconcile that in your marriage in this culture?
Man, I don't even, how to begin this is so difficult because, I remember visiting Africa for the first time in 2001 and watching a man walk in, and 15 minutes later, watching his wife walk in, and they had to walk in separately because they were not allowed to walk in together. Even though they came from the same house, they left their house at the same exact time. There was this cultural expectation. It used to be men sit on one side, women sit on another. In our context, that has changed mostly because we're in a city. If you go to a village church, it's going to be different. Men sit on one side, women sit on the other. And women have these duties, men have these duties. You will never see a woman doing this. However, I span a gap for some reason because of my white skin. I span a gap that says I can do basically what a man can do. I'm allowed to go and preach. Like I can definitely preach to women. I can lead, I can discuss, I can teach women for sure. And I'm also finding I'm also allowed to span that gap into the male group. I don't even know what to call it. And mostly it's because I have white skin. And so I'm like, okay, so how do I help model a marriage when I span a gap that these women don't span? And so in discipleship, we try to talk about, you are filled with the Holy Spirit, just like the preacher. You have the Holy Spirit in you. And I'm not trying to give all the equality, and don't get me wrong. I believe they are as equal as a man, and in God's eyes, they are beautiful and loved and equal. But if I use that language, I don't want them to take that language and not think the Holy Spirit is what gives me the words I can speak, because the Holy Spirit has given them to me. I am a vessel of the Holy Spirit just as much as the preacher is.
I think you bring a good point in that there are things that you have to recognize aren't going to really change in this culture during your lifetime. And how do you help the women that will operate inside of those boundaries still find their worth and find their value and be able to operate well within that. And then sometimes it's pushing back against the wrong that you see in that culture. There was a time, my son, we were out in the garden and he whipped a hoe up and it clocked me right here. And it was like my blood started pooling under my eye. My husband thought I had like internal bleeding, whisked us out of the country to try to get to a hospital. And when we come back, my eyes are blacked. I've got stitches across my forehead. And the people that are friends with us at the border assume that Josh beat me because that was a normal thing in the culture. And so it was like Josh pushing back to be like, I would never be a woman, let alone my wife, and being able to stand up for those things to show value where you can push back against that. And so, I think that it is a fine line when you're in a culture like that. And it can also mess with your head in the spouse relationship when maybe you are a woman who had leadership roles and has gifts that you're used to exercising and stretching your muscles, and then you come and you feel confined, and it can cause tension in your marriage as you see your husband go out and lead and do things and you're like, I'm not taken seriously. And just about how do you handle that communication between the two of you, to make sure that when things are rocky, you're communicating well. Karen, do you have any communication tips for married people?
Oh, I communicate.
Never wondering what you're thinking.
Well, the first thing, and one thing that Matt said to me when we were talking about this today, is again, kind of what you said about making a plan and discussing beforehand is, we communicated early on. I don't think we did it before we got in the field, which I think was an issue. We had to do it on the field, and then we had to kind of, back it up when we were on the field. But we had to define what successful ministry looked like for us and for our marriage and for our family, and define what success meant, and then communicate that not only to each other, in those times of tension or instability or even, imbalance, because there will be imbalance, even in a Western culture, there can be massive imbalance on, your husband's role or your role, especially if there are children, and your roles will be imbalanced and the expectations will be imbalanced. And so, to make a plan early on and keep it on the table between the two of you and also with your coworkers or local partners, what success looked like for you. And we've just really had to be intentional to have those tough conversations. And sometimes, listen, I mean, you guys, you know me enough now through my writing, probably, that I've talked a lot about, when we've had, where my husband has said yes to roles that I have felt that we should not have said yes to, is probably a big one. And the tension that caused between the two of us, and really it was a long time of communicating through that with each other, also with a counselor, but with each other a lot, and with the Lord, on why that caused that tension, and what, the burdens that God was placing on me, or the things that he was telling me that led my discernment in one way. Well, my husband felt very much differently about that. And, I think because we didn't have those conversations before we entered our, country of service, that when we did arrive and that went awry, we had to kind of backtrack and then define what that meant and work through, the pain or the hurt that caused. But we do, now we have very different roles in separate spheres. And so our communication is different now because those roles are more independent of each other. But I think early on, when it was very much, we were parallel workers in a similar ministry, we had to really be proactive in speaking, but proactive in listening and hearing and really pursuing what that other person was telling you. And we didn't do it right early on, and we paid for it and worked through it, and the Lord was good to heal that. But I think that's probably like you said, make a plan early on, and then just keep it on the table, keep that conversation open, so that, because I mean, there will be seasons, and there will be seasons of where it will go swimmingly and nothing will change at all. But you know, you will be doing everything you did before and it's working, and something somewhere, you may not even know where it is, will tweak, and that experience will change, and you'll have to revisit it, and to be open to that with each other. And I think, and I mean, this may be some kind of off topic, but to have that first conversation be with each other, you know, maybe not, but what our issue was early on was our first conversation was between him and a supervisor or a colleague, instead of between the two of us, and maybe even 2 or 3 conversations before it got to me. And that was tough, you know. And again, like I said, the marriage that we were in 15 years ago is different than the one that we're in now. And so now I think maybe one conversation would happen, it would come back to me, you kick it back to that person, you know. There's a lot more give and take now than maybe we knew how to do back then.
What your conversation is making me think of is even the comparison game among different types of marriages on the field, because you have people that women thrive and want more of a leadership role, and then you have women who it's like, I am so glad to be here and just support the work that my husband is doing. And sometimes those expectations that you have of each other, you know, like speaking those early on of like, hey, I know that the season that we're in right now is that I have kids, and that takes up a lot of my time because I'm homeschooling them and I'm fixing and I'm marketing and I'm doing all the things that just, we have to survive, and I'm happy to do that. But my heart is that I really want to be a part of those conversations. And if I can't be in them, please share them with me. It gives me life to feel like I'm a part of what you're doing, versus, nope, I don't need to know. And this is where I feel. And like those types of expectations and those conversations had early help you and your dynamic to know, and not be comparing with, well, she seems to always know what's going on and I don't know what's going on, and how come I always have to hear it from her? And you know, just like helping, if you guys are communicating well as a spouse, then you're not going to be intimidated or threatened by anything, because you guys, we get it. I understand that I'm not going to know yet because he tells it to me later, or you know, those types of conversations between you that help communicate your expectation of your role and your hopes of your role on the field. And, you know, when you do that and you understand what gives life to each other, then you can start protecting that in each other. And so one thing that I knew about my husband was he needed to play the guitar and sing. And early on in our marriage, it irritated the living daylights out of me, because I'm doing dishes and he's singing and I'm like, hello, you know. But later I realized that me protecting that for him was actually, that was a service in his life for his heart. And it helped him to keep serving well, and it healed things in him when he had the time to do that. And so I think as a spouse, it's also looking for those ways that you can know what your spouse needs and protect that and provide that protection for them and them for you in your life. And that even just goes to people that know you well enough. And I'd like to a little bit talk about how that doesn't only have to be other married people, that those singles that are in your life, maybe they can't speak on the dynamic of the husband and wife communication, but they can speak about you. And so I would love to hear your input and your advice on single people and how they can have a role and encouragement in your life and in your marriage on the field.
I had a friend say to me last week, she was making a lot of decisions and she was saying, you know, I just wish I had a husband to share all these decisions with. And I'm just like, I understand where you're coming from, but sometimes you get 2 different decisions and then you have to decide which decision you're going to go with. And that's really difficult sometimes. And so, you know, I love hanging out with my single friends, and I love seeing how they pour into, I have 3 girls. And so especially single women, I love seeing them show my daughters that marriage is not the end all be all. And, you know, I have a happy marriage. I get to show them and model that for them. I pray that continues for the rest of their lives, but well, for the rest of my life. And I want them to see the strength and the beauty in being a single woman who is serving her God, doing what she does best, and them seeing that God is well pleased with both. And so I love having my single friends come over to dinner and share in our life. And no, not the babysitting. I don't expect all my single friends to be the babysitter. If they want to, fabulous. I will not say no. But at the same time, it's not like I'm sitting here saying, and you're gonna, no. I love having them come over and sit at our table and share in my girls' lives in any way, shape, or form. I love it when they're from different cultures doing the same thing, and they get to learn about cultures all around the world from all of these amazing women who are speaking into my daughter's lives and seeing how God can work everywhere. But
I love that. To me, one of the big things has been the loss of other relationships that my children will have with their aunts and uncles or extended family. And we have just, through the years, we've been so blessed to have people in our lives, and particularly singles, and particularly single women. There's some single men, but, I think generally single women, both, local friends or colleagues, or even just, we've made a lot of international friends now, and who, like you said, you invite them over to dinner, or they become a part of your extended family, or you hope they do. Like, that's really our prayer, is that they do feel like that they're a part of your extended family and can, speak into your children's life, speak into your life. We have a friend actually who's coming next week who probably comes to us at least once a year. A couple times it's been twice, and she lives in another country and is an American but lives overseas. And so she's come to spend the holidays with us. And I can't tell you, just, every time we think about her coming, it's not a burden, because by now she's a sister, and we she's like a big sister to my daughter. She's a friend to both me and my husband. So she gets to see those conversations. She gets to see a lot of those conversations that my husband and I have. And she's independent of the work as well. And so we can have someone who can offer a different insight or perspective, or just listen and observe. But it has been such a blessing to us to have those relationships with single women, and to know that they have a really unique perspective to offer us in communication, in how we raise our kids, in how we balance life and ministry. And so, actually, now I'm really excited for her to come. She's going to quarantine at our house for a couple of weeks when she gets here. But God's been really good to answer some of those needs that I don't think we knew that we would have when we came, because I think you do assume, well, we have each other, and it'll be grand, but you do need those other relationships and different perspectives, and just like an extra voice in the house, or it's just, we all need that. I was going to say also quickly, older single ladies as well on the field. God has been so good to us, have become like mothers and dear friends. And, I have one who's no longer here in Ireland, but we're still in communication. And I can't tell you just what a gift that's been for both of us. And, I don't really have anything else to share, except we just so value these women in our lives. And I'm so thankful for them, because you don't realize some of those losses or sacrifices that aren't as obvious until you find yourself kind of in a hard place, and you think, oh gosh, I wish I had my sister here, or I wish I had my mom here, and God has been good to provide that at the right time for us.
I just want to echo that, and I would say there is not something as encouraging as a strong single woman who is confident in where the Lord has her. And as a married woman with lots of kids overseas, I felt so tired and depleted. And what I longed for was what the single women had, which was the time and the dependency on God. Like, they were not distracted by, I can depend on my husband, I have to take care of my kids. And whenever those women challenged me and lived their life and spoke to me what the Lord was speaking to them, it was so encouraging. And there was a longing of, I'm so grateful for your input in my life because I'm distracted by so many wonderful things, but I'm distracted. And it was inspiring and renewing and life-giving to be able to hang out with women who were like, I have the privilege of focusing on different things right now. And it was like a window into it in a life that I don't get to live, but I'm so blessed by getting to watch you live that. And it was just lovely. And I loved how even my husband could fill a role of helping them with the things that's like fixing this or being able to be that protection of, hey, if you're scared of going to the market at this hour, call us and let us go with you. And like standing in and filling roles and inviting them into our community. So I felt like it was such a reciprocal relationship. And I never felt like it was poor you, let us come alongside of you because you're here. It was like, thank you for the window into what your life looks like and the blessing that you are to us.
I had a good single friend here for a few years. And when my babies were small, she would invite me over to her house like once a year. And I would come over and we would watch a movie or we'd do something, that just felt extravagant to me at the time. She cooked me a great dinner or we'd go do something fun. And I'd get to sleep alone in a bed with no children coming into me. And then in the morning, she'd make me breakfast. And she had an espresso machine. And I just remember when she first asked me to do that, I was like, you want to invite me over? you want to like feed me? It just was such a surprise gift. And I think about that all the time about what she did for me. And I'm sure she was probably like, yeah, why wouldn't we hang out? Why wouldn't you want to come over to my house? And she had her own apartment. It was just like, I was like, this is the dream.
The dream.
But it was just, I never forgot that. And, my hope is that we're able to do that for our single friends in return. Our pull-out couch gets a lot of use, sometimes too much use, but a lot of use. And we do joke about loaning Matt out because he's like a woodworker, handyman type of person. So we do kind of joke that it's like a hire a husband for an afternoon type of thing. I'm not really sure the legalities on naming that, but whatever.
Sarah, I want to talk about I want to go in a little bit of a different direction, but I want to ask, is there anything that we need to address from the comments?
Has anybody complained about anything I said yet?
What lines have we crossed?
No, everybody has been very encouraged by what has been shared. And just as a single, I want to say I appreciate what you guys are sharing, and the husband and wives on the field who could be sort of like big brothers and sisters to me was so encouraging and so helpful. So thank you for what you guys have shared.
Well, we've just a little bit about the hardships that could arise from serving overseas. But there's some pretty fantastic things about being married and living overseas and the things that we get to do. And so I just want to open it up to tell us the great things. And, I want to throw in there just even about dating your spouse overseas and what has that gotten to look like for you guys? So share with us a little bit about that.
You first, Heidi.
Oh gosh, come on, Karen. Let's see. So I live in a tourist spot and not really, like we're more up country, but seriously, I look out my window and I have this huge mountain with waterfalls coming down. I go an hour away and there's this beautiful waterfall with an amazing hotel right at the bottom of it. And anniversary trip. It was perfect. And so just, I live in paradise, and that is a perk. You go to a restaurant and you get this view, and it takes forever to get your food. So you have built-in quality time. Seriously. It's like James and I were both like, that's a perk. It takes forever. So you just have to sit there and talk or sit there and play a board game. We take board games with us. We sit there and play a game. We chat, we hash it out if we need to. And it's like, you have 2 hours because it takes that long. And that's a perk.
That's an amazing perk. I love that. My husband, now he works a little more of a traditional schedule, but we've been in arts ministry for several years. And so that has been offered us some non-traditional hours where we could have dates during the day when our children are in school. And so one thing that we tried to do every year, I don't know if we'll do it this year, is have, like a first day of school date. And we have just, we live in Dublin, which also is a tourist spot. But we live so close to so many other places. We're a half hour from the mountains, a half hour from the beach, a half hour from the country. And so we're really trying to take advantage of that first day of school date when we can. And that's just, keeping those traditions, I'd say maybe has been a big part of our dating life, or a part of our fun life, where we know. And like I said, I don't know if it'll happen. I'm hoping it will. Ireland's doing okay. We're gonna make it. I believe it.
Good luck.
But yeah, I'm having to hold it maybe a little loosely now. But yeah, so we do, we'd squeeze in a day date when we could, so we didn't have to worry about a sitter. One thing I will tell you, probably my favorite memory with my husband, is we do an annual conference every year with our mission or with our organization. And a few years ago, it was in Slovenia. And in order to fly where we needed to go in Slovenia, we had to fly into Venice. And so, everybody was so excited. Everybody's like, we're all going early and we're all doing this holiday. And so we went, it was just 2 days, and it was ungodly hot because we don't live in a hot climate anymore. And so my children were miserable. But they were just at the right age where we could leave them in the Airbnb, and we could walk to a cafe. And we walked to this cafe, and we just stood at the counter and we drank our cappuccinos. And I just remember looking at him thinking, I never ever thought we would ever get to do anything like this ever, especially when your children are little. You think, this will never happen. I will never, I won't, get to do something so extravagant again. You do eventually, I promise. But I just remember thinking then, what like a privilege it was to be with him, to have really weird on the cheap adventures when we could, and to really savor those tiny, like kind of like sitting at that, restaurant and waiting for your food and just beholding something beautiful, to really savor those little moments of grace and of beauty and of pleasure, and as the gifts that they are, yeah, I just really remember that. I still use that picture. I took a picture and I use it for everything, even though it was years ago now, because I'm like, we both look great and we're in Venice.
Doesn't get better than that.
Doesn't get better than that. We were both drinking coffee, feeling great.
One other thing I will add, something you said, Karen, triggered my mind. Savoring those small moments. And sometimes you can't get out of the house. You can't go anywhere. You can't do anything.
Yeah.
A gift that was given to us on our wedding day, but something any of us can do, is a special set of dishes for eating supper. And it's 2 plates, 2 salad plates, 2 cups, 2 napkin rings, 2 napkins, like very simple, but those are our dishes. And so we used them, I think the first day we came home from our honeymoon at our new apartment. We used them the first day we brought our daughter home from the hospital. We used them, and so we pull them out on date nights or anniversary nights. And it's a reminder of who we are, our commitment. It's a reminder of this is us. And life doesn't look great sometimes, but we get the dishes out and we remember. Or sometimes life is going amazing. Get the dishes out and let's remember this. Yeah.
Oh,
So
I love
that was a
Love
gift
that.
I love that gift, and I give that gift now. That's like my.
That's a
Oh, that's
great
so
idea.
great.
Because honestly, you don't want to keep a whole set of dishes your whole life. But like, I love the idea. My son just got married, of telling him, hey, even if you break everything else, save these 2 from your first set of dishes and make them your special. And you bring up a good point. For those of in our community who live really far out there, and yes, we get to maybe go and do the Venice every now and then. That was really a hard thing to wrap my mind around, is that this is cheap, but it feels extravagant.
Yes.
And is it okay that we're in Scotland and spending Christmas in Scotland? Is that okay?
Ooh.
But yeah, is that sometimes you have to make those special moments where you're at. We had a friend that was serving in like a village in Kenya, and way far out there, and he would take tropical petals and put them around in their hut for his wife on those nights that were different and special, just like doing something that showed I'm trying and I care and this is meaningful. And it doesn't always have to be the huge extravagant things, but it's the intentionality behind making something special. And when we were in that type of a situation out in the village, and maybe we got out of that every 6 weeks, we had actually Lauren, who was on our chat last time, she was so amazing to say, I want every Wednesday night to be my night with your kids. And she would cook them a meal, and they would watch something fun together. She would download it all day so that they could sit out there. And it was just, Josh and I would order Indian, and the little guy would bring it up on his motorcycle. And it was just like, that was our date night. And we didn't go anywhere, but it was just something that was special. And I think we can get so busy and feel like the work is so important that if we don't create those things in our marriage and in our relationship, they're the first things that get chucked when there's a need or there's something. And so like prioritizing those as I value the work here so much that I'm going to pour into my spouse. And I value the work here so much that I'm going to protect this time. And giving yourself permission to take care of that relationship is like from day one. We give you permission. If you needed it from somebody, you have permission to go on that date and to make that a priority and to say no to other things. So
I wish we gave permission more, like vocal permission more. That's a great goal.
What do you want permission for? Just let us know. We will give you permission. Just
put it in the comments. We'll give you permission.
But yeah, so if you have any date ideas, things that you have been able to do, please put those in the comments. Let others know, hey, who isn't looking for a good idea for a date? Sometimes they have those little books of little suggestions, and sometimes just because it's written down, it makes it, oh, this is totally fun. Let's try this, you know? But any resources that you guys, as we're nearing the end of our 1 hour conversation, please unload resources that have been helpful, encouraging to you, that maybe people that are watching or listening to might want to take advantage of.
I wrote down just a couple. Yeah, I will go first. I don't have any books to hold up. So the first one, actually, this just came to my mind kind of as you were talking about your husband playing the guitar, is the 5 love languages. Like, I know we kind of joke about it now a little bit about love languages in our house, but early on, it was really valuable to understand the different ways we communicate and receive love. And even now with our kids, there's an online quiz you can take. So if you don't feel like reading a book, do not feel like you have to. I'm here to release you from the burden of reading another book.
Permission to release.
But there's an online assessment, and we had our teenager do it recently. It was for an article I was writing about college, and so I made my kid do it so I could research him. And it was actually so helpful to see his love language. We thought we knew what it was, and I think we were correct, but it was so good to see it written out and clarified, and for him to think through the questions. And so that would probably be the first thing that I would recommend, is the 5 love languages, the book and the online assessment. And I can put the link in the comments. The second one would be Boundaries by Henry Cloud. We found this really valuable, not necessarily for our marriage, but it was for our marriage, but not about boundaries between us, but boundaries to protect our marriage and between marriage and ministry, which I think can get blurred really easily if you're working side by side together. And then this is another thing, which is more of an organizational resource. So if you're with an organization, if you haven't done it, or maybe you have, is the Berkman assessment, which a lot of multinationals use to help employees learn about their gifts, their stress behaviors, skills assessment. It's very extensive. So not everybody can have access to this resource, but if you do have an organization, I highly recommend suggesting it if you can. You take the assessment, but then you also get a report back. And one of the reports is how you are in your workplace, but also how you communicate in your marriage. And so my husband and I just spent one night reading through our reports and going, oh, this is why you're that way. Or, oh, this is why we need to protect this, kind of what you're saying about your husband. We need to protect your need for artistic spaces. We need to protect your need for being outdoors. These are things that we need to protect so that our stress, reaction does not go outside of this little box. If you do the Berkman, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, when we're stressed, my husband goes, I think you're out of the box, Karen, because there's a stress behavior that, anyway, I won't go into it. But those are just 3 things. The easiest one is the 5 love languages, boundaries, and then Berkman, if you're with a large org, I highly recommend that.
One of the ones I mentioned earlier is Love and Respect by Dr. Egerich's, I forget his first name. It's here, but I can't see it. And then we did that one early on in our marriage and loved how it just helped us to see how he saw things and how I saw things and how they did not meet in the middle, and how can we get to the middle without going crazy. And so we enjoyed that resource very early on. I've got Sacred Influence by Gary Thomas. I have not read everything, but I have loved what I have read in the book. And so I'm still working through that one for myself. One of the things that has helped my husband and I is MBTI, Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. And it's an oldie but a goodie. And it just helped, he's an ISTJ and I am an ENFP. We are opposites. Yay. And so just trying to figure out how can opposites attract and how did we ever get together, and how, wow, we do complement each other really well. And then also Enneagram. I know a lot of people are into that right now. It does.
I was going to mention that too. Yeah.
Yeah. My husband won't take it, but I know mine and I think I know his. So I won't tell you his because I'm not supposed to. But those things will help people get together and say, wow, I never knew that about you. And
so do you have a favorite Enneagram book that you would recommend? Because I know there's a lot of them out there.
Oh, I will look it up and I will put it in the comments.
Yeah.
Okay.
I recommend, we read The Road Back to You. And when I say we read, I read it and then I read sections of it out loud to my husband. And one thing I appreciated about that book, and it's kind of similar to the Berkman report, is it said how you are at work, how you are at home, how you are in your relationship. And so I knew what my number was. I'm a 6. And I wasn't sure what my husband was until I read how you are in a relationship. And that was so clarifying for both of us because it really spoke into our communication styles, our needs. And he's a 4. He's a 4 who wanted to be a 7. And so I read the 4 to him and we had to come to an agreement that he was a 4.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's a podcast too, but that book was helpful for us, particularly the relationship part. So you don't have to read the whole book if you have kind of an idea what your number is, but read those relationship parts. If you're in a marriage, and others for like, if you're working, with coworkers, I think it's helpful too. But that was a big one. I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
So there's so many resources for marriage in general that are applicable no matter what. I know that Tim Keller's The Meaning of Marriage has been really instrumental for my family, and we made my son read it, and we made our college kids that we claim as our own read it, and so that is something. But specifically for cross-cultural workers, we want to, I did it upside down. I was going to not do it upside down. But Serving Well by our good friends over at A Life Overseas, Jonathan and Elizabeth Trotter. There are some chapters in here and some things that are sprinkled throughout other chapters that really have to deal with specifically cross-cultural marriage and some hard things that we haven't, didn't even get the chance to get into today. But just like pornography is an issue for men, whether they are in America, in Canada, or overseas somewhere, and just like being totally honest and open. And how do you start your marriage and your relationship with transparency and accountability for something that is just going to be a struggle for men? And, how do you help as a wife protect your husband from any more temptation than he has to be a part of? And so, but this, what I like, was I holding it upside down again? Anyway, what I like about that is that it brings the cross-cultural perspective into it. So if you guys are not familiar with that, I think I'm assuming Amazon has it, right? Okay. And if you guys have other resources that have been impactful for your marriage, please put those in the comment. This is going to be this is what community is about, is sharing those things and encouraging with each other over that. And honestly, I feel like we've scratched the topic of this, but I hope that this has given you some things to think about, some resources, and hopefully some conversations to have with other people that you're around, and the freedom to ask for more conversations from those who you could be encouraged by for that. And I just want to say, I've had a blast with this Summer Live. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun today with you guys, and I want to thank you for being on with us. And we are going to be talking about if this was something that we want to do every season. And so, if you have any thoughts on, did you enjoy doing this? Would you like to hear some more topics for us if we were to do this in the fall? Let us know what you think. And so this is going to be the end of our Summer Live series. And next week on Velvet Ashes, we're going to have a welcome week where every year, as people transition onto and off of the field, we get more people in the Velvet Ashes community, and we just want to introduce what the blessing of Velvet Ashes is. And so tune in next week as you get some behind the scenes for those people that help make Velvet Ashes happen. And there's a free gift for everybody at the end of next week. So we just want to encourage you guys to stay tuned, and thank you very much for joining us for our Summer Live series. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.